I had been dreaming about this day for months, finally moving into my new home, a fresh start in a quiet, suburban neighborhood. The boxes were stacked in the driveway, the sun glinting off the freshly painted siding, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. I could almost hear myself settling in, imagining peaceful mornings and calm evenings. But that feeling didn't last long. From across the street, I noticed her, HOA Karen. She stood near the mailbox, arms crossed, glaring at me like I had just done something unforgivable. There was something unsettling in the way she watched, something I couldn't quite place. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe first impressions were just tense. But her approach changed everything. She walked up to me, voice sharp and accusing, demanding to know what I was doing, as if I had no right to be there at all. My heart raced, and I felt a mix of fear and disbelief. This was supposed to be my safe space, my new beginning, and yet here I was, facing hostility I hadn't anticipated. Karen's anger escalated quickly. She threatened to call the police, painting a story in her mind that had nothing to do with reality. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to defend myself without making things worse. Instinctively, I reached for my camera, my hands trembling. If she lied, I needed proof. Every word she spoke, every step she took, was being recorded without her realizing it. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the neighborhood holding its breath, watching silently from behind curtains and fences. The police arrived and my stomach sank. Karen was quick to speak, twisting the truth with conviction, confident that her version of events would seem believable. I swallowed hard, knowing that in a matter of minutes, my fate could depend entirely on what the footage I captured would reveal. Would anyone believe me? Could my video actually expose the lies before it was too late? I glanced at the camera, its lens quietly recording, and then back at Karen, whose confidence was unshakable. Something inside me told me this was far from over. Whatever happened next would change everything, and I had no idea how it would end. Even as the police took notes, I couldn't stop thinking about why Karen had reacted this way. Moving into a new home should have been simple. A paperwork check, a friendly wave to neighbors. But apparently, my presence had crossed some invisible line in her world. I remembered reading the HOA guidelines before buying this house, trying to understand the rules, the restrictions, everything. Nothing I had done was out of bounds. Yet here she was, acting like I was some kind of intruder. It wasn't the first time I had dealt with people like this. In my previous apartments, I'd encountered small conflicts, misunderstandings that eventually faded. But Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor. There was a sense of obsession, a rigidity that went far beyond normal complaints. I had heard stories from other residents, quiet whispers about HOA conflicts escalating, neighbors forced into unnecessary fines or disputes, but I had brushed them off, thinking those situations seemed extreme. Now I was living it firsthand. As I unpacked in my new home later that evening, my mind kept drifting back to her face. Sharp eyes, tight lips, and that cold, unyielding stare. I realized this wasn't about parking rules or garden decor. It was personal. Something about me, or perhaps just the idea of change in her perfectly ordered world, had triggered her. I could feel the tension building, not just between us, but inside me. Fear mixed with frustration, and I wondered how far she was willing to go. I also thought about the footage I had captured, small, shaky clips that now felt more important than ever. Each recording was a tiny piece of the puzzle, a way to tell the truth when words might fail. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was documenting something bigger, a story of authority abused, of lies spun to manipulate others. The stakes felt enormous, and I realized this conflict might not stay confined to my driveway or my home. The neighborhood, once peaceful in my imagination, suddenly felt charged. Every sound outside, every passing car or figure in the window, seemed loaded with potential threat. And through it all, I couldn't shake the question that gnawed at me. How far would Karen go to protect her version of reality? And would anyone even believe what actually happened? The next few days were a whirlwind of small confrontations and whispered threats. Karen didn't stop at calling the police once. She seemed to patrol the neighborhood with a quiet, judgmental gaze, scrutinizing every move I made. I noticed her approaching other neighbors, speaking in hushed, convincing tones, painting me as the troublemaker. It wasn't just paranoia. There were subtle shifts in how people looked at me, small nods or furrowed brows that made me question whether anyone would actually see the truth. Meanwhile, my own frustration was growing. I wanted to confront her directly, to call her out on her lies, but part of me hesitated. The moral dilemma gnawed at me. Should I escalate things and risk making her accusations seem plausible, or stay calm, gather evidence, and wait for the right moment? Every choice felt loaded, and the tension inside me kept building like a storm about to break. Adding to the pressure, another subplot quietly emerged. A few neighbors, quietly observing the chaos, began reaching out to me, sharing their own stories about Karen. Small injustices, unexplained fines, petty disputes. It was strange, almost surreal, to hear the same patterns over and over. I realized her behavior wasn't random. It was systematic. This made the stakes higher, not just for me, but for anyone else living under her scrutiny. The camera footage I had might be more than a personal defense. It could expose a chain of deceit that affected the whole community. Even at home, I felt the tension creeping in. Every knock at the door made my heart race. My own doubts began to surface. Was I overreacting? Was I reading too much into normal neighborly interactions, letting fear cloud my judgment? But deep down, I knew the truth of what I had recorded, the way she twisted facts, the way she manipulated authority. The camera didn't lie, even if people sometimes did. And then came the small, subtle reveals that made me pause. A fleeting glance of her scowling at my backyard, a suspicious pause outside my window late at night, whispers that seemed to follow me in the street. Something bigger was brewing, a confrontation that felt inevitable, though I couldn't yet see how it would unfold. Every interaction, every shadow, every piece of footage I captured became part of a growing puzzle. One I knew I couldn't ignore, but also couldn't predict. The days that followed felt like walking through a minefield. Every glance from Karen was sharper now. Every word she spoke carefully measured to provoke or intimidate. I could feel her watching me, waiting for the smallest mistake, and it made every movement deliberate, every interaction tense. I kept my camera close, fingers hovering over the record button, heart hammering at every unexpected sound. Late one evening, I noticed her standing near my driveway again. Only this time she wasn't alone. A neighbor I barely knew lingered nearby, glancing at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Karen's lips curled into a faint, knowing smirk. Something in her confidence told me she thought she had already won, that the police, the neighborhood, and maybe even I would side with her version of events. Inside the house, I replayed the footage over and over. Each clip revealed small lies, inconsistencies in her story, moments she assumed were invisible. But what if the wrong person saw it first? What if she managed to twist these moments against me before the truth could come out? My mind raced, trying to anticipate every move, every possible betrayal. I caught myself staring at the window, seeing shadows shift outside, wondering if someone was hiding in the bushes, watching me pack boxes or take out the trash. The air felt heavier. Each knock on the door made me jump. Every phone call from a neighbor seemed loaded with tension, every text ambiguous. The neighborhood that had once felt quiet and safe now seemed alive with suspicion. And then there was the confrontation that felt inevitable. I could almost see it. Karen, furious, pointing fingers, shouting over my protests. I imagined the police standing between us, uncertain, listening to her words over mine. I imagined the doubt in their eyes if they didn't have the footage in front of them. I knew I was close to exposing the lies, close to a confrontation that could change everything. But something told me this wasn't going to be simple. The tension, the secrets, the watching eyes. It all felt like it was about to explode. I gripped my camera tighter, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for whatever came next. And then, out of nowhere, I heard a sound at the back door. Slow, intentional. I froze. Whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be there yet. The moment hung suspended, every second stretching, waiting for the first move. I slowly turned toward the back door, every muscle tense, ready for whatever or whoever was waiting. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Karen wasn't alone. She was crouched beside a small pile of packages I had just received, rifling through them as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. Her eyes widened when she realized I was watching, but instead of running, she froze. For a brief second, I thought maybe she would stop. Then came the real shock. The neighbor I had barely trusted, the one who had been observing Karen all week, stepped forward. Only, instead of helping me, they smiled faintly and whispered, "I didn't think you'd notice so soon." My stomach dropped. I had assumed at least one ally in this strange neighborhood tension. Now it felt like betrayal. Like the ground beneath me had shifted, I fumbled for my camera, heart pounding, and started recording again. Every subtle movement, every stolen glance between Karen and the neighbor seemed calculated. The scene was no longer just about petty disputes or false complaints. It was orchestrated, like a trap I had unknowingly walked into. I realized that Karen had allies, or at least someone willing to misdirect the story, and the stakes were far higher than I imagined. My mind raced, trying to process the layers of deception. The neighbor's calm expression contrasted sharply with Karen's growing panic. It was as if they were both actors in a play, each playing a part in a story I was just beginning to understand. I felt a surge of anger, frustration, and fear all at once. How many people had been silently complicit? How many lies had been told that could turn the community against me before the truth ever surfaced? And then came the subtle, almost cruel twist. Karen, in her haste, knocked over a small table. The sound drew another neighbor to the scene, someone I had thought was neutral, watching from a distance. Their eyes landed on the camera in my hands, the blinking red light exposing that I had been recording the entire time. For a fraction of a second, time froze. Would they believe me? Or would the story be twisted further, manipulated before the truth could be revealed? Everything had escalated beyond petty HOA drama. Now it was about exposure, trust, and survival. And in that charged moment, I realized the next decision I made could change everything. Forever, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding the camera high. The red recording light glowed steadily, a silent declaration that the truth was here, and impossible to ignore. Karen's face twisted with fury, her plans unraveling before my eyes. The neighbor who had betrayed me froze, caught between loyalty and fear. In that moment, everything shifted. The chaos, the lies, the tension. It all came to a head. "I have it all on record," I said firmly, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. Every word, every accusation, every attempt to manipulate. The truth is right here. The police officer standing nearby took a step closer, eyes flicking between Karen, the neighbor, and the camera in my hands. For the first time, I saw doubt in Karen's confident stare. She realized that her story, her carefully constructed lies, was crumbling in front of everyone. Karen tried to speak, to twist her narrative, but the footage told the story better than words ever could. Her threats, her intimidation, it was all captured. Even the neighbor who had seemed complicit could no longer deny what was recorded. The tension was electric, almost unbearable, as silence fell over the small crowd that had gathered outside my house. And then came the unexpected twist. As I replayed the footage for the officer, I noticed something I hadn't caught before. A subtle action on Karen's part that revealed she had tried to tamper with one of my packages before I even noticed. This wasn't just aggression. It was intentional sabotage. The realization hit hard, reframing everything I thought I knew about her motives. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined. Karen's face drained of color. She realized that the evidence not only protected me but exposed a deeper level of deceit, one she hadn't anticipated being uncovered. My hands shook as I lowered the camera, adrenaline giving way to a strange sense of calm. The confrontation had reached its climax, the lies exposed, the truth undeniable. Even then, as the police took statements and neighbors whispered in astonishment, a quiet thought lingered. While this chapter had ended, the shadow of her obsession and the fragile trust in the neighborhood would take much longer to heal. I had survived, but the battle had revealed more than I bargained for, both about her and about how easily truth and perception could collide. The chaos had finally settled, though the tension lingered in the quiet corners of the neighborhood. Karen's lies had been exposed, her attempts to manipulate the truth laid bare for everyone to see. The neighbor who had seemed complicit approached me cautiously, a hint of shame in their eyes, and quietly admitted they had been swept up in Karen's influence. It wasn't malice, they were just afraid. That small admission reminded me how fear and power can twist even the best intentions. I walked through my home, now peaceful for the first time in weeks. The boxes were unpacked, sunlight poured through the windows, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. My camera rested on the table, a silent witness to everything that had happened. It wasn't just a tool. It was a shield, a way to tell my story when words alone weren't enough. I realized how important it was to stand firm, to document the truth, and to trust my instincts, even when the world seemed against me. Looking back, I understood that this experience wasn't only about Karen or the neighborhood. It was about boundaries, courage, and the strength it takes to face falsehoods head-on. Each neighbor, each interaction, taught me a subtle lesson about human behavior. Fear can hide behind authority, but honesty and persistence can cut through the deception. Even as life returned to a sense of normalcy, I noticed small changes in the community. People were more cautious, yes, but they were also more aware. Conversations that once whispered judgment now carried curiosity and empathy. And in the quiet moments, I reflected on the unexpected connections forged amidst conflict. People who had come forward quietly, willing to share their experiences, who helped me see the bigger picture. As I stood on the porch, the sun dipping behind the rooftops, I felt a strange mix of relief and contemplation. Moving into this home had been a dream, but it had also been a test. I learned that truth is fragile yet powerful, and that standing up for it, even when it feels impossible, can change not only your own story but the story of everyone around you. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't loud. They're the quiet moments of courage, the small choices to speak, record, or act when fear says you shouldn't. And that, I realized, is what makes a house truly a home. The truth isn't always easy, but it's always worth standing for. If you've ever faced someone who tried to rewrite reality, remember this. Trust yourself, protect your story, and don't let fear silence you. If you enjoyed this wild HOA drama, don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for my next shocking story. You won't want to miss it.